And we are following breaking news in the NFL, where the league's owners have unanimously voted to approve the sale of the Washington Commanders from Dan Snyder to a group led by Josh Harris. That is the latest from our NFL insider, Jonathon Jones. It is a sale for an NFL record $6 billion. A private equity investor, Harris also owns the Philadelphia 76ers, the New Jersey Devils. Now, this ends a very tumultuous 24 years with Dan Snyder at the helm in Washington, under investigation by not just the league, but also Congress about misconduct, sexual harassment, financial improprieties. The league also this afternoon releasing the findings of their investigation, announcing it was fining Snyder $60 million. Now, as for the sale, most expensive U.S. franchises right now, this latest sale at the very top, just over $6 billion. Just behind them, the Denver Broncos, which sold not that long ago for just under $5 billion. Let's welcome in NFL insider Jonathon Jones to talk about this. Let's start with the sale here, what this means for the Commanders. We heard from Josh Harris a little bit ago saying, look, he's very excited to be back where he's from, but also very busy with his other franchises that he owns. Talk to us about the sale, how it finally went down.
Yeah, Amanda, a whole lot to get into here, but as you know, we will start, of course, with Josh Harris. The immediate future of the Washington Commanders. So this is a unanimous approval for Josh Harris. We knew that this was going to happen today. This part, not a surprise at all. $6.05 billion, Josh Harris and his group, a number of limited partners, including Magic Johnson as a part of that group. There's still some I's to dot, T's to cross, but suffice to say that for the start of this season, Josh Harris will officially be in the big chair for the Washington Commanders. He is a man who has held a minority ownership stake in the Pittsburgh Steelers. That's sort of the farming ground, if you will, for future NFL owners. Jimmy Haslam with the Browns did that. David Tepper, before he bought the Panthers, was with the Steelers. And now Josh Harris, of course, we see there with the 76ers, with the Devils. He's sort of owning that I-95 corridor up there in terms of major pro sports franchises. He knows how to run teams, and he knows how to put people who know how to do the certain jobs in sports franchises in places. I'm told he's not a meddlesome owner, but of course we've heard that before about new NFL owners, and then what do? They come in there and they start meddling just a little bit. So we will see, but in talking with sources in Washington the last couple of days, I said, hey, what's going to be item number one here? Is it the stadium? It's not the stadium. It's getting boots on the ground and trying to get more money in the coffers of the Washington Commanders. Look, this is a team in an area, the Mid-Atlantic, in the DMV and DC area, that there's so much money concentrated in that area that, frankly, sponsors and, business people and businesses themselves, entities, have decided not to give their money and dollars to Dan Snyder over the past couple years. It's up to Josh Harris and his group to start bringing these people back in and saying, hey, it's a new day for the Washington football franchise, now known as the Commanders, and we want your money. We want your business. And so that is number one for Josh Harris. Yes, the stadium will ultimately get done. Right now, the leading candidate is the RFK Stadium site, but still plenty of red tape to get through before we get to that. And then what's going to happen with the Commanders on the football field? It is status quo. Ron Rivera remains the head coach. Sam Howell goes into camp as QB1. You will not see any changes football-wise for the Commanders just because Dan Snyder is out and Josh Harris is in. We see Ron Rivera right there, of course, the playoffs from a couple of years ago. Last year came so close. Look, whether there was an ownership change this year or not, I think reasonable people could say that Ron Rivera and his group would be on a warmer seat in the 2023 season, certainly as they kind of put their chips in with Sam Howell at quarterback. But they have Eric Bieniemy at offensive coordinator. Josh Harris and his group, they have not been able to really communicate with anyone on the football side, really anyone over there outside of a few folks at the very top of the food chain on the business side until today, until this got approved. So we're going to see boots on the ground. We're going to see them try to get more money in with the Commanders, and they're going to get their hands around and figure out what it's like to be the full owner of an NFL franchise.
Yeah, it'll be really interesting. He said, obviously there's a lot of work leading up until this point, but really this first season's a lot of listening. He also said, look, the first thing is football, and then it's fan experience and engaging with the community. I mean, is this a team that needs to reconnect with its fans and the community?
Oh, of course. I mean, you're talking about a quarter century of Dan Snyder ownership. We can have a good, healthy discussion on whether he's the worst owner in professional sports history, but it's impossible to argue that he's been the worst owner in the NFL. Impossible to argue. And you consider the incredible history and success of the Washington franchise, really up to him purchasing the team 24 years ago. Remember, it was such a feel-good story there at the turn of the century. You had the youngest owner in the NFL, I believe in NFL history, who was a huge fan of the team, and he was going to take them into the 21st century, and instead he took them back to the dark ages and leather helmets and caveman-like behavior and all sorts of things that we're going to get into with investigative findings that were just released. But yeah, there needs to be, in a sense, and we need to, sort of speak in relative terms with sports fans and their teams, there needs to be a healing that's done here. And Josh Harris, it's very easy for him to clear a very low bar that Dan Snyder set by being a better owner than him. So yes, say that you're going to work within the community. That is an obvious one. And try to reconnect with fans and try to get those businesses and those entities and those sponsors. They haven't had a beer sponsor, Amanda, in years, ever since Anheuser-Busch left them. And so they're going to be able to pull in a whole lot of money. They're going to be able to bring back fans just by virtue of Dan Snyder no longer being there, not having an office there anymore. And now anything you do on top of that, well, that's just icing. And then obviously you need to win. But right now, they're not really dealing and dabbling with the football. They just need to focus on what they can control, and that is reconnecting with a fan base.
Jerry Jones arriving to that vote saying it was a great day for the NFL, and I'm sure many people will echo that sentiment there. Let's talk about Dan Snyder. Roger Goodell and the league also today releasing the findings of that investigation. We do know that they're finding Dan Snyder $60 million. Walk us through some of the findings that came out of that investigation and what we need to know about it.
Okay, well, first of all, Amanda, $60 million fine, I am nearly certain, and this is obviously breaking, but I'm nearly certain that is a record in the NFL. I understand folks are going to look at this and say, well, he got $6.05 billion for the team. So what's $60 million? It's still a very large number in terms of punishment. What the investigation led by former SEC chairman, the Securities and Exchange Commission, not the conference in college athletics, Mary Jo White, what she found, and this investigation lasted a long time, and there were plenty of investigations before this one, but the findings are now public. And essentially, what was sustained in her investigation after talking with numerous witnesses, including 1 hour with Dan Snyder and reviewing thousands of documents, what she was able to sustain was that Tiffany Johnston, a former Washington employee, she had alleged years ago that Dan Snyder had inappropriately touched her on the thigh during a work dinner and then pushed her into his car afterward. The investigation sustained those allegations, and we say that rather than a confirmed because, of course, Dan Snyder denied all of those allegations, but there were other witnesses, other things that the investigator was able to determine that these allegations were sustained. The other one was really centered on financial improprieties that a former employee with the Washington franchise had said a couple of years ago. And that was, and it gets a little complicated here, but the sort of top line item is that the Commanders, and of course back then they were the Redskins, were hiding money from the NFL's revenue sharing pool. And so, this salary cap and this incredible health that the NFL at $12 billion annually has, they get to share in revenue, all 32 clubs, to help make everyone competitively equal. And so what the Commanders were found to do were, when they were making some money that should be going to the revenue pool, well, they were actually shaving that and hiding that and saying, well, no, actually, that's the money we get to keep. And what the findings through forensic financial sort of techniques and tactics found were that approximately $11 million using these sort of tactics were hidden from the NFL and not shared with the NFL's revenue sharing pool. That's a big no-no in terms of what you do in the NFL. Everyone shares, everyone's in on this together, and the financials are out there, at least in the open, for the NFL. So They needed some very unique forensic techniques in order to find this. And so when we talk about $60 million, and Roger Goodell did not get into this and break it down, but one can certainly assume that that is payback of the 60. 11 million of that is probably payback there. Some of that is certainly a punishment. And then finally, there are a number of legal fees. Let's not forget that there's the John Gruden email court case that is still lingering out there, any number of investigations and how much those have cost, and court fees and legal documents, all of those things probably get lumped into the $60 million. We don't know that, but it is a pretty small logical leap to figure that that's what is all encapsulated in that 60 million figure.
A lot of details there to go through, Jonathon Jones. And as you mentioned, Roger Goodell just took a handful of questions, just about 5 for him, about 5 for Dan Snyder. But of course, people can follow you on your social media pages. You can also check out more from JJ on CBSSports.com. All right, Commanders training camp, that gets underway tomorrow, the 21st, when it comes to a training camp tour, CBS Sports HQ. We're going to be live from various training camps, including the 23rd through the 24th. We're kicking it off, Kansas City Chiefs.